Good evening and welcome to The Report. I'm Jonathan Steele. The Iraqi army has joined together with Kurdish Peshmerga and recaptured the Mosul Dam from the Islamic State forces. Nathaniel Amos Sansom has been following this story.
Iraqi and Kurdish Peshmerga forces have retaken the Mosul Dam after its fall to Islamic State forces 2 weeks ago. This media handout from the Iraqi Ministry of Defense shows a number of vehicles in the area close to the dam being targeted and destroyed by airfire. There were fears that ISIS might have breached the dam, causing a flood surge along the Euphrates River that might have reached Baghdad. For the American president, who has put a lot of political capital behind the ability of the Peshmergas to repel ISIS, the news was a vindication of his policy of military aid, but not involvement.
Today, with our support, Iraqi and Kurdish forces took a major step forward by recapturing the largest dam in Iraq near the city of Mosul. The Mosul Dam fell under terrorist control earlier this month and is directly tied to our objective of protecting Americans in Iraq. If that dam was breached, it could have proven catastrophic, with floods that would have threatened the lives of thousands of civilians and endanger our embassy compound in Baghdad.
The American government has maintained that its military operations have remained strictly limited to helping those groups persecuted by ISIS and the security of American personnel in the country. It is stated that any further assistance will come only if Iraq is governed in a more inclusive way, something which helped topple the premiership of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki in favor of the designated candidate, Hadiya al-Abadi. Unity between the different groups, however, will not be easy. Speaking from Istanbul, the former Sunni vice president of Iraq, who is accused by the Iraqi government of running death squads during his tenure, says that the current strategy of Iraqi and Western forces will not achieve peace.
If you want to help the Iraqis, try to change the course. All what we need, in fact, to be fair and try to look into the whole Iraqi scene in fairness and don't discriminate between the Shia and the Sunni. You are now trying to resolve the Iraqi issues by continuous airstrikes. I could say that after a while, the United States is going to discover that they changed nothing for this airstrike.
The capture of the Mosul Dam ends the immediate threat that ISIS posed to Baghdad, and is a victory that Iraqi and Western forces claim to show that ISIS is on the retreat across northern Iraq. But evidence of a plan for Iraq's future beyond the defeat of ISIS is harder to find. Nathaniel Amos Sansom, Islam Channel.
Well, to discuss all this, I'm joined now in the studio by two people from Iraq, Sabah Al-Mukhtar, president of the Arab Lawyers Association here in Britain, and Mehiyar Kathem, a doctoral candidate at the School of Oriental and African Studies. Welcome to the program. Let me start with you, Sabah Al-Mukhtar. I mean, do you think these airstrikes are actually beginning to degrade ISIS enough to defeat them?
Well, I think ISIS is a gang which is moving from one area to the other. It's not a regular army. It's difficult to say they are defeated. Yes, the dam has been taken over, but there is nothing stopping them from going back into it. Same thing applies to any of the towns or villages. But this idea that the U.S. intervention and it's the protection of the American citizens in Soleimani or in Baghdad, whichever area they're, in Erbil rather, it's the excuse for the internal, for domestic purposes in the U.S. It's not changing things on the ground, except that the supply of weapons, the supply of some air force power, it's enabling certainly the Peshmerga to take back the dam, and for ISIS to move away. Now that doesn't mean that this is the end of the story. So it's really more of a media. I think it's changing the emphasis from the problem in Iraq to this issue of both the terrorist act of ISIS, where they push the Yazidis and the Christians, and to make it's a fight for the dam. Well, the dam is there, it'll continue to be there. It doesn't matter whether Peshmerga are sitting on it or the ISIS. But there is this idea that we want to show that we have one. The president is talking about their effect. The British government is talking, one listens to Cameron. Cameron is talking about ISIS being a threat to the UK, and he's supplying arms. And so this is, I don't think this is really the issue. Of course, it's the cover. The media is really concentrating on it, but that's not the problem in Iraq.
Mehiyar Kathem, I mean, are you as sort of negative about it as Sabah. I mean, obviously nothing can be done overnight to push them right back, but to capture something that they had previously held is a step forward, isn't it? And now the Iraqi army has taken part. Could they not recapture Mosul, the city, not just the dam, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question. I actually disagree with Sabah slightly. I think it's good news for Iraq. It's good news for the people of Mosul who are being held hostage by ISIS or the Islamic State. If we can just look at this dam, for instance, it's the 4th largest dam in the Middle East. It was built in 1980, came into service in 1986. According to the US Army Corps of Engineers, in 2006, a key report said that this was the most dangerous dam in the world because it was built on unsafe ground and engineering work wasn't very good. So let alone, I mean, just the dam itself is very insecure. With the ISIS there, it could actually mean the end of Baghdad because it could send a 5-meter wave into Baghdad and a 20-meter wave into Mosul, 2 million people, so effectively affecting 20 million people in Iraq. If you look at the significance of this dam on the Tigris, one of 2 key rivers in Iraq, I think that the Iraqi army, this is positive news for the Iraqi army, as well as the Peshmerga, of course. It could not have been done without the American Air Force. The American Air Force is a critical feature of any future settlement in Mosul with the ISIS, and there has to be an alliance between the Sunni Arabs and the Shia Arabs and the Kurds to actually take Mosul from ISIS. It cannot happen by the Peshmerga alone because of sectarian issues.
Well, I mean, what about the big change in the last few days, the appointment of a new Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi? I mean, do you think he is now going to reach out to the Sunnis? In fact, what has the reaction been of the Sunni political leadership to his appointment?
In fact, this is a split within the same party. It's the Dawa party. Maliki and Abadi is from the same party. They are both aligned by, it's a party which is an Iranian creation, financed, backed, and managed. I don't think there will be a policy, but maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But there are no indications to that effect. For instance, he can stop bombing Fallujah, for instance. There's no ISIS there. He's still bombing the so-called Sunni areas. He's still bombing these areas. He could stop that one.
I thought ISIS was in Fallujah. They captured it in January this year, didn't they?
No. This is the media, or this is the propaganda of Maliki, that all of this area, you know, whether it's Fallujah, Ramadi, Mosul, everything is ISIS. Because ISIS is Qaeda, and this one meets with everybody's. But the idea that somehow half of Iraq is controlled by ISIS is a little bit ludicrous. It's the people there who have been oppressed for a whole year, and they have resorted to arms. That's why you have the military councils, you have the tribal councils, and of course there is ISIS. But the idea that all of this area is controlled by ISIS, and this is where the problem of quote-unquote liberating Mosul. Liberating Mosul, it's going to be fighting the people of Mosul, because generally they are not with ISIS. They don't want ISIS because it's imposing on them all sorts of restrictions, destroying mosques, churches, and everything else. However, they are not being abused as they were before the January uprising. That's when they got rid of the...
But then what does Abadi have to do to bring the Sunnis in and to create a wedge between the Sunni Arabs who are local and these infiltrators from outside, the ISIS people?
Yes, well, as I said, in the first instance, there are certain things he can do. Stop the bombing of Fallujah, Ramadi. Stop, begin to actually allow others to work. Denounce the crimes that were committed. He has already said so many good things about Maliki that it doesn't bode well where he's going. And then the Iranian influence is going to continue there because this is part of the same policy. So I hope I'm wrong, but this is the indication how it's going. He has difficulty within the political scene. The Kurds have their demands, the Sunnis have their demands, even within the Shia camp. Maliki is not going to allow him a free hand. Maliki went out from the door and he's going to come through the window because he's imposing his restrictions, including the supply of British weapons to the Kurdish region. Maliki said they mustn't. They must give it to him, and he will decide when to give it and to whom.
Well, what do you feel? Is it a good thing for Britain and the United States to arm the Kurds, or should the weapons go via Baghdad?
I think my personal opinion is that it should go via Baghdad, where they can actually come to Baghdad and negotiate a political settlement regarding the failure of a sectarian system. I mean, let's not fool ourselves. This is the product of a 10-year sectarian system imposed on Iraq. The Sunnis are in uprising against this. The Shia likewise. Muqtada Sadr likewise. I mean, this is a system that does not represent Iraq. Iraq has, for 5 millennia, has actually been people of two rivers, people of Mesopotamia. And therefore, you have in 2003 a system that actually has promoted sectarian identity, and the Kurds are actually, in terms of what we've seen, the only winners in Iraq. It's not the Shia so much. It's actually because in the long term there has to be a political solution between the Sunni Arabs and the Shia Arabs. So the key issue here now is for Al-Abadi to actually construct a political settlement, a type of conference. I mean, I haven't heard so far of this happening, but this is what needs to be done, to bring all these different stakeholders in Baghdad. You've mentioned the weapons. Of course, weapons are essential in fighting ISIS. ISIS is a very well organized and backed and financially wealthy organization. Weapons is a very important part of that, but it's the type of weapons that we're speaking about. The type of weapons to fight ISIS is important, but for the longer term battles, which will happen eventually probably, if there is a future Kurdistan, then that might see the same weapons being supplied by the West, used against Sunni Arabs and the Shia Arabs and other communities in Iraq.
Of course, the Kurds took advantage of the collapse of Mosul to capture a lot of land, including the city of Kirkuk, which was disputed. I mean, do you think they're ever going to retreat from that, or in fact, would the Iraqi army try and push them out of there?
Well, we can only do that when there is a political settlement between the Sunni Arabs and the Shia Arabs. Alone, Baghdad alone, with the type of sectarian system that we have, the Shia alone cannot actually fight for areas that are Sunni areas very much so, as much as anyone else is. So this is very important. The weapons that were captured are in the hundreds of millions of dollars, captured and taken to Erbil, and of course on the other side taken to Syria. And so you see the connections, the type of sort of porous borders in terms of how weapons are flowing between different groups. And so America has to be very careful of who it supplies. It has to supply the Baghdad government, the Baghdad inclusive government in Baghdad, which is the only solution to Iraq's problems.
And what's your view, Sabah, about the Kurds? I mean, they were very confident about 6 weeks ago. Now they're not so confident. I mean, will they begin to see that they need to be allied with Baghdad?
No, I don't think so. The Kurds, the foreign policy, the Western policy, which started with many years ago with the Sever Treaty that the Kurds will never have a state. Then we decided that they are going to have a semi-state. Now there is a fact on the ground. I don't think the Kurds are willing to go back. They said they will enter into discussion with Abadi, with the new prime minister. They said they will enter into the government provided their conditions are met. And there are difficulties. You need to change the constitution, but the Kurds don't want to change the constitution.
Well, I think on that note we'll have to end. We're going to go now to our first break of the evening, but do join us after that when we'll be looking at the rest of today's news. Stay tuned.